In the Red Sea, a crisis is brewing. Dozens of commercial ships have come under attack in international waters in recent weeks, with many becoming targets of drone and missile attacks, and some even being hijacked. And the attacks are not just a threat to the container ships, they're a threat to the entire global economy. So, what is really going on? And who is behind these seemingly random but unending attacks, you may ask? The Houthis, a militant group from Yemen and backed by Iran, are no strangers to causing trouble in the Red Sea. They've become far more brazen recently though, sending missile after missile across the narrow body of water, threatening sea lanes which much of the world's oil is shipped, and worrying states across the region, as well as across the globe. But before we dive into the crisis to understand who the Houthis are, what they want, and how the crisis could upend the global economy, let's start at the beginning. On November 19, 2023, when the Galaxy Leader, a Japanese-operated British-owned cargo ship, was hijacked by Houthi rebels, the rebels descended on the ship via a helicopter and quickly took the crew hostage, turning the ship to the nearest Yemeni port at Houthi. The Galaxy Leader was seized not long after transiting the Suez Canal and moving deeper into the Red Sea, en route to its final destination in India. The 25 crew members taken hostage, including Bulgarian, Mexican, Filipino, and Ukrainian nationals at the time of this video, have still not been released. Immediately, leaders and politicians around the world condemned the hijacking, whereas Houthi rebels only doubled down, saying this was just the beginning. Since declaring their intent to target all ships heading to Israel on December 9th, the Houthis have launched at least 10 more attacks in the Red Sea, massively disrupting maritime trade. Most of the attacks come just north of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the narrow gap that links the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and the Arabian Sea. By December 18th, there had been 37 incidents involving shipping vessels being threatened, attacked, or hijacked by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. And it's almost certain that there will have been even more since. The Houthi attacks have included the use of cruise and ballistic missiles, drone attacks, and armed boardings, and already they're throwing the entire global shipping industry into chaos. Many shipping companies are now rerouting their ships, avoiding the Red Sea altogether. Instead, they're taking a longer journey around Africa's southern tip to go between Europe and Asia. This significantly increases transit times and in some cases by an extra 2 weeks. We'll get into more detail about how the crisis is seriously affecting global trade in just a bit, but suffice it to say, there have already been serious effects. In fact, the matter is so serious it's already raising the alarm among world leaders at the highest level, the UN Security Council. The council met on January 3rd to discuss the continuing attacks by the Houthi rebels and discuss a course of action. At this point, though, let's step back for a moment and unravel the crisis, starting with the culprits. Who are the Houthis? For years now, the country of Yemen has been entrenched in a devastating civil war. In reality, it's long been a sort of proxy war between the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels and a Saudi Arabian-led coalition. And since the early 2000s, the Houthi movement, rooted in northern Yemen's Zaydi Shiite population, has been in active rebellion against the central government. In 2022, a fragile ceasefire was established between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi rebels, who now control a wide swathe of Yemen's territory, and, maybe most importantly, much of the coastline on the Red Sea. Since then, they've only grown stronger, consolidating control. Meanwhile, the Presidential Leadership Council, Saudi Arabia's attempt at a legitimate government, is struggling to fight back. Key to their strength through it all has been their most important ally, Iran. Long-standing ties between Tehran and the Houthis go back over a decade, and today, the Houthis are one of Iran's most potent proxies. It's believed that Iran is providing the rebels with their sophisticated missiles and drones, which they've used to not only target shipping, but also strike key Saudi infrastructure. And now, the Houthi rebels are declaring war on Israel and the West, in solidarity with Hamas, another of Iran's proxy groups in the Middle East. Initially, they began targeting vessels linked to Israel and those headed to Israeli ports, but in recent weeks, they've only gotten bolder and bolder, now effectively challenging the US and its allies by disrupting the entire Red Sea, and the consequences are global. Besides the obvious threat to crew members and damage to ships, the Houthi rebels' intensified attacks in the Red Sea are severely disrupting global shipping and trade. Already, major players in international shipping, like the Denmark-based Maersk Group, are pausing cargo shipments through the Red Sea, with massive consequences for the global economy. But how can that be? How can a small conflict in a tiny waterway send shockwaves around the globe? The Red Sea is one of the most crucial global shipping corridors in the world, connecting Europe and Asia through the Suez Canal. There are two strategic choke points to consider here: the Suez Canal in the north and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the south. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a mere 20 miles wide, is bordered by Djibouti, Eritrea and Yemen, and it's the gateway to the Indian Ocean. Nearly 10% of global oil trade passes through it, about $1 trillion in goods every year. In comparison, the Strait of Hormuz, which much of the world's oil has to pass through, is about 30 miles wide, although it too has had its issues with security. But recent attacks in the Red Sea have already forced some container ships, like the MSC Palladium 3, to turn around completely instead of continuing their journey closer to the Houthi-held coast. And much more are following. Along with Maersk, major shipping companies, including BP, are cancelling transits through the Red Sea. Rerouting all the way around Africa adds some 3,000 nautical miles and up to 2 weeks of travel. And shipping companies are now adding the extra costs as a transit disruption surcharge or a war risk surcharge. Before the crisis, a container ship traveling from Taiwan to a port in the Netherlands would have traversed the strait and taken about 25 days. Now, with ships being forced to reroute around the southern tip of Africa, the same journey will take around 34 days. It's not surprising then that delays are expected worldwide, with major companies anticipating delays in product supplies if the situation persists. The extent of the rerouting is enormous. Already, about half of the regular container ship fleet, representing 18% of global capacity, is now avoiding the Red Sea altogether. In number, that means 299 vessels, capable of carrying 4.3 million 20-foot containers. Some ships are still risking the journey, but only after signaling extensively that they have no ties to Israel. Prices reflect the impact the crisis has had so far. In October, before the Houthis began attacking ships, the average transport cost for a container going from Asia to the Mediterranean was about $1,500. That price rose quickly after the first assaults were followed by more, and ships started to reroute. By December 29th, the price had ballooned to $2,400. Finally though, the international community has had enough. In response to the attacks, the United States has launched Operation Prosperity Guardian, a maritime task force in the Red Sea. This international naval effort, led by Washington, is aiming to secure key shipping channels in the region, acting as protection for ships transiting the strait. The operation was announced on December 18th by U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. The US-led task force involves naval warships and personnel from various countries, including the UK, Bahrain, Canada, and several others, with France, Italy, Spain, and India also independently patrolling the corridor. And conflict has already arisen. On December 31st, US naval helicopters thwarted a Houthi attempt to hijack a Maersk container ship in the Red Sea, engaging and destroying 3 of the 4 attacking Houthi boats. Can Operation Prosperity Guardian really work? Let's compare it to the issue of piracy in the same region just a decade ago. Somali piracy was running rampant around the Horn of Africa, as highly organized bands of pirates hijacked ships, targeted valuable cargo, and often got violent. At its peak around 2011, the entire Indian Ocean was a risky corridor for container ships and vessels of all kinds. But then something incredible happened. Piracy off the Somali coast saw a dramatic decline, falling from 358 total attacks between 2010 and 2015 to just 8 between 2016 and 2022. What happened? How could the issue seemingly disappear so fast? Similar to what Operation Prosperity Guardian is attempting, this decrease resulted from global efforts against maritime crime. While piracy once surged in the waters between Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, international military and naval support effectively solved the problem and eliminated the threat. How? After attacks on ships from all major nations and companies led to unified military action, with France and the US at the forefront. The piracy issue didn't stand a chance, and Operation Prosperity Guardian is hoping to do so once again. However, that won't be so easy without drawing the anger and potential retaliation of one state in particular, Iran. We've already seen how the Houthis act as a proxy for Iranian interests, but even more concerning, newly declassified US intel indicates that Iran has been deeply involved in planning the operations against commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Iran is deeply involved throughout the Middle East to a worrying extent. While they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars aiding the Houthis, they've also been funding Lebanon's Hezbollah and Shia militants in Iraq, while propping up the Assad regime in Syria to the tune of billions. Not to mention, they give over $100 million a year to the Palestinian group Hamas, which recently rekindled its violent conflict with Israel. So, the regional ramifications of challenging the Houthis and their backers in Tehran are going to be consequential, to say the least, especially with much of the world's attention pinned on the Israeli-Hamas war in the Gaza Strip. Really, the question many are asking is, how does this crisis end? Much of the future of this crisis around the Red Sea will hinge on the actions of both the Houthis and their Iranian patrons, and Iran doesn't look to be backing down. On the contrary, it's rejected US and UK demands to cease its support for the Houthi attacks. The Iranian Navy even deployed a destroyer of its own into the Red Sea recently, upping the ante in an already unstable situation. The Houthi attacks in the Red Sea are also raising concerns about the potential for a wider Middle East conflict. The ongoing Gaza war sparked by Hamas on October 7th has not yet led to a broader regional war involving the US and Iran, but with the escalation in the Red Sea, the risk seems to be growing. Because of this, the US, for its part, is cautious of direct military engagement with the Houthis to avoid further escalation. In the end, and despite the US launching Operation Prosperity Guardian, there's no sign Yemen's Houthi rebels will halt their Red Sea attacks anytime soon. While no merchant ships have been hit since the operation's announcement, the threat still remains high. So, where does the conflict go from here? Only time will tell. But it would seem the global economy and security in the region remain at a critical juncture. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be notified when similar videos get posted. Thanks for watching.